Live.
Good morning, and thank you for coming to another edition of Coffee with Librarian. Today we have we have a very special guest, and we're going to get all of your questions answered. Every last time, we made a list, we got it, no worries. Just some of the things to look forward to here at the headquarters library and at all of our branches. So this month, all of our branches will be having an event for Women's History Month. So please go to our calendar or our social medias to look at those flyers so you can get the date and time. Headquarters will be having two events. One of them is this weekend. It's the all women's art show. So I'm super excited about that. Please come out and see what the ladies of Clayton County have been up to and the work that they create and their visions. Okay. Another event that we have coming up that is really phenomenal. We've been working with the South Lake Mall to get information about how you can start your own business inside the mall with a kiosk. So we have Ms. Siobhan Flemings. She'll be coming out and doing a whole seminar and have applications on hand on March 26th at 6 p.m. So please come out for that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our Director Scott Parham.
Good morning. How's everyone?
Good morning.
Good morning. How's everyone? Good. So glad to see everyone again for another episode of Coffee with the Librarian. I'm Scott Parham, the Director for the Clayton County Library System. And the way we usually structure this segment is that after Kimberly gives her updates, we will field several questions that have been submitted online. And then after that, we have a very special guest today that we will have an opportunity to have a nice discussion with, and we will proceed accordingly. So Kim, what do we have today?
Okay, so our community is really excited. You know, spring is coming, and right after spring is summer. So a lot of our questions are based on the summer.
Okay.
So last summer we did splash passes. They want to know, are we doing that again?
Yes, we were very excited last summer about the partnership with Parks and Rec in order to have the splash passes available to the community. And we expect that relationship and that partnership to continue this summer.
Very good. I actually used those splash passes. It was great.
You had a good time?
Spent the whole day there.
Good.
Yes. Lazy River was my life. So in the past week, our Riverdale location opened late with a boarded up window.
Yes.
Many of the patrons would like to know if it's open and fully functional.
Yes. The branch itself is open for business, regular hours. All the amenities, all the services are available. Unfortunately, we did have an incident early one morning, and there's an ongoing investigation, so I can't talk too much about it. But on the cameras, we noticed an individual who, for some reason, just started throwing rocks at the windows. So to dispel any rumors that may be circulating or any innuendos, there's nothing nefarious going on at the Riverdale Library. Again, it was an unfortunate event where someone was just mad and took it out on the windows at the branch.
Understood. What may we expect for the upcoming summer library system? What may we expect for the upcoming summer from the library system?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Well, as you know, we do our annual summer reading program. And in the past, we've really focused on programs and performers for the children and the youth. We are incorporating more and more adult programs into the summer reading because we know that oftentimes the parents are the ones that bring the children to the libraries for the events. And we want to make sure that we have something for the parents and the adults also. So while they're here, they can participate, take advantage of programs that are offered specifically for them as well. So we're looking very forward to that.
Okay. And what's new? Has anything been updated or changed with the library system?
But we always have something new, always something new going on. I do want to mention a couple of things. Last summer, we had a wedding exposition or wedding expo. Now, we only felt it proper and right that for those that were seeking to get married and wanting to get married, that we also offer on the opposite spectrum. So last month and beginning this year, we have what we call an uncoupling series. And we had speed dating offered at the library last month. And it was a very nice event. We had roughly between 25 and 30 participants come out. And we will continue to offer that. And we will continue to offer programs along that same theme of uncoupling. And so as the community sends us their wishes and what their interests are, we will definitely try to make those happen. Advanced voting. Headquarters library, a couple of the other locations are advanced voting sites. So if you have not already voted, please get out, vote. Advanced voting will end on March the 8th, and on March 12th is the presidential preference primary. So please make your vote and your voice heard. That's pretty much it for updates right now. Are we ready to jump into our interview?
We are.
Great. Again, we are so fortunate today to have one of the great leaders of Clayton County. Today, we are going to be talking with the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Chief Landry Merkison. Thanks for being here, sir.
Good morning, and a special hello to everybody who's joining us online. So it is indeed my pleasure to come and sit down with Director Parham at coffee with the librarian and have a conversation kind of about where we are in Clayton County. So just a little brief synopsis of my history. I've been with the county for 28 years now. The majority of that time until March of last year was spent with the fire department. Last 10 years, fire chief and director of emergency management. So in March, I transitioned over to the chief operating officer's office, and yeah, just anxious and looking forward to getting this county moving.
Good deal. Good deal. And that's a very good segue. We've got a list of questions that we would like to ask that have been submitted by the community, and we'll just have a discussion and go from there. That's okay.
Outstanding.
Great, great. Currently, there's an ongoing feasibility study for the creation of a community improvement district along Highway 138 corridor. Can you talk a little bit about what a community improvement district is and how it will benefit Clayton County residents?
Sure. So community improvement districts were established by the legislature kind of as a way for local governments to partner with businesses to provide additional infrastructure upgrades and modifications within a set geographical zone.
Okay.
So there's currently one approved CID in the county, and that's the Airport South CID. So it encompasses the areas of Phoenix Boulevard, kind of the north end of Riverdale Road, that area just south of the airport. The feasibility study that's mentioned here in this question was being done by a company called Nickelworks. And we were looking at establishing another CID along the 138 corridor as you come out of Henry County into Clayton County and kind of that commercial district. The thing with community improvement districts is they're only related to the commercial value of the property, right? So they don't affect the residential that might be in that particular area. And in order to establish a CID, you have to have 75% of the businesses that represent 75% of the value within that district have to vote to enter into a CID. So it's not something that the county can just say, hey, we're going to establish a CID in this area. Because it does impose additional taxes and fees on those businesses.
Okay.
The trade-off for the businesses is any revenue that's generated within that geographical boundary has to stay there. So road improvements, public facility improvements, libraries, other county facilities, public safety is kind of a way to generate area-specific revenue. The current status of that RFP or that study, there wasn't enough participation at this point to formulate that CID. So that process is continuing. Our vendor is still having conversations with those business owners.
Okay.
So it will kind of continue to make its way through the process. But we do have the one right now that's been established.
Good, good. To piggyback a little bit about the CID, you mentioned taxes and property taxes. And I know it's something that several patrons have come in and have expressed to us the increase with property taxes in the county. Are you able to talk a little bit about that and the increase in property taxes?
Sure. So, it's kind of the main thing, right? That a lot of our citizens talk about it is their taxes, and that we all understand that that's what funds our government. The vast majority of our budget as a local government comes from property taxes. So what we're seeing right now, and this is where, in some of our budget hearings, we do our best to explain it, but it's kind of a complicated math equation that gets us to it. But let me see if I can break it down as easy as we can. So inflation affects everything, right? Not only from the goods and services that we provide, but it also affects our market and our housing market. So we all know that, with interest rates, despite interest rates being where they are, our housing market and our values are at heights we've never seen, right? So I believe in speaking with our tax assessor, just about 100% of the values in Clayton County are above their 2008 valuations. So we've seen this tremendous rise in the value of property just given to market conditions. Well, logically, as those values rise, so does the property tax, right? Because if your house was 100,000, now it's 200,000, there's going to be that incremental increase. Right. There's sometimes, though, a misnomer that because values are going up and your property may have been assessed higher, that your taxes are automatically higher. Well, what the board did this particular budget season, this past one, was even though values had gone up and the digest had grown, which is good because that's indicative of a healthy growing county when your digest is growing, right? Okay. Well, what the board did is they chose to roll the millage rate back. So actually your tax rate went down, but because your values were up, your property taxes kind of leveled off. So we had the same funding level that we did in our last fiscal year, but with a higher value. Okay. So it like I said, it gets a little complicated, but the simple answer is home values are up. That's a good thing. It is a very good thing. What you don't want to see in a community, because I know that there are some other questions around growth and what are we doing as a county. We want to see that digest growing because what that's telling us is we have new people coming into the county. Right. We have vacant businesses that are now being filled. We have new businesses that are coming in, and other taxes that we generate off of personal property, utilities, and all that are growing as well. So it's indicative of a growing community.
Right. And that leads right into the next question about growth. Several decades ago, the population size for Clayton County was in the low 200,000s. We're reaching close to 300,000 now. Mm-hmm. Are there plans to increase job opportunities, educational opportunities, things for the county, or things to be done to help uplift the county and its residents?
Absolutely, and you're correct. And as Hartsville-Jackson continues to grow, Clayton County kind of becomes a preferred landing spot, for that. But with that comes demand for services, right? So where we find ourselves now with the county is we're starting to look for ways to rebrand and redevelop ourselves. Okay. We came in. You look at what's available in land, and there's not a whole lot of just vacant land for the county to start to continue to develop. So we're starting to look toward redevelopment in a vertical world, right? Okay. So with that, you start looking at all of the things that we have coming, and the county is putting in some specific plans around trying to look at acquiring older properties that may be now in areas of blight or becoming eyesores or nuisances to the county. We're looking for ways to mitigate those and turn those into housing options for our community. You start looking at the board recently, when we start talking about MARTA and some of the stuff that's going on with MARTA, they created a lot of transit-oriented development overlays now, kind of around some of our MARTA expansion spots. And within those, we want to focus on those live, work, play destinations, right? Having a transit node that's centered around employment opportunities, housing opportunities, a mix of housing opportunities, but then some of that restaurant capacity, right? So a lot of our challenges with our restaurants and stuff is you got to look at where the housing stock is and what the current demand is. Mm-hmm. So as we want to start attracting some of these different restaurant chains, in a different variety of restaurant chains, then we got to change what the building mix is, right? So we got to start looking at some of these areas that may be older in construction and what's there, and then how can we look to start trying to redevelop those to spur that growth that I think we all want to see. I was born and raised here, in the county, so obviously I have a vested interest in making sure that this county thrives. Sure. One of the things that I've heard mentioned, I think, at a couple of the Board of Commission meetings, and this has been a while ago, was the formation of neighborhood planning units, or NPUs, much like the city of Atlanta. Are you able to talk a little bit about the development of NPUs in the county in certain areas, or is it being discussed throughout the county? Yeah, well, it's not only is it being discussed, but it's an application now. So in District 1, Commissioner Anderson's district, I believe she has 5 community planning units. So neighborhood planning, community planning units, kind of very similar in context, right? So essentially the thought pattern behind it is, and I've been fortunate enough to attend a couple of those meetings, but we've taken District 1 and she's broken it up into these neighborhood planning units. And essentially we sit down with those homeowners and those residents and we say, look, talk to us about your community. What is it that you want to see in your community? Here's kind of the boundaries for this. And they vary, right? Because you have various housing stock. You have some areas that's primarily heavy industrial and commercial. So the needs and the wants kind of change. And that's really how those start. You sit down and you get the residents to say, give us a list of your wants and your don't wants. And then we can take that back as whether it's planning and zoning, community development, other areas of the county and say, okay, how do we start trying to redevelop and attract businesses, working with economic development, working with the development authority to meet the needs of what the citizens want to see, right? But it's a great way to get the neighborhood involved and give them some decision-making processes. So when we get to those zoning hearings, if they're functioning properly and we're doing what we want to see done, then it should be overwhelming support for these businesses that are coming in because it's something the community wanted to see and not just something that just popped up.
Right. Are there discussions in some of the other districts, or if residents in the other districts have similar concerns, is there a way that they can essentially submit their wants and their things that they don't
Absolutely,
want?
yeah. So all of our commissioners, have their own versions of monthly meetings and e-blast and things that they do in community town halls, specifically for that. All of our commissioners are very good at getting out there and providing those opportunities for their community to express what it is they would like to see. They may all have their own kind of spin on how they do it, but absolutely there's tons of opportunities. And I urge our citizens to take advantage of those community meetings and those town halls because that's the opportunity to sit down face to face with your commissioner and ask those questions.
Wonderful. With the library, again, try to bring guests in that can talk about the resources that are available to the community. Again, I would encourage those who are online listening, those town halls that the commissioners are having in your areas, please sign up, please attend. Very important. If you've got issues about your property or, again, things going on in your neighborhood or your community, wonderful way to express those concerns. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that we from time to time here at the library deal with when either in the library or even out in the community and other communities, there has been a historical perception about Clayton County. And I know that from the leadership perspective, we are making strides and doing things to try to change that perception. Is that something that you can talk a little bit about?
Absolutely. And this is something that, has been kind of a key point for me. Like I said, I was born and raised here, grew up here, graduated from North Clayton High School. So I've seen Clayton County from earlier years. We don't need to get into the what years, but from earlier years to where it is now, right? And one of the things that as leadership we talk about internally is we got to do a better job of telling our own story, right? Because a narrative is going to be created, and it's up to us as leadership to determine whether or not that narrative gets rebutted, right? But it doesn't just stop there. That filters all the way down to our citizens as well, right? And trying to get factual information about what's going on in the county out there, because too often the negative does override the positive, but there's a tremendous amount of positive things that are going on here in Clayton County, and we have so much to offer, but the overwhelming negativity just tends to override that sometimes, and in some cases, we're our own worst enemy, at that. So we've got to do a better job of making sure that we highlight all of the positive things that go on in this community, but then get our citizens to sing that same narrative as well. I noticed, that there was a question kind of about the school, and wrapped around accreditation. And we still hear that, even though a few years past them getting their accreditation back and making tremendous progress and doing a lot of amazing things at the school board. But everybody still wants to focus on the accreditation, but it's a past issue. And we've run across some citizens that didn't realize we had it back, as well. So it comes back to, once again, getting that positive story out there and that positive narrative.
Yeah. And I've told my staff this before, if folks don't know the answers, they create their own.
Sure.
And it's based on most oftentimes things that are negative as opposed to being positive. So,
Absolutely.
Wanted to talk a little bit about emergency management. And we, the library, and I'm sure it's not just specific to the library system. We've had a few community emergencies lately, and sometimes we don't hear about them until sometime later. I do know that the sheriff's office has Tixel, I think is the app, Nixel, where they send out notifications. Has there been discussions of a county-wide emergency notification system?
Yeah, so we've, this is kind of an ongoing conversation topic in the realm of emergency management. So we did a few years back, when I was still emergency management director, we established Code Red as our notification system here in the county. And residents can go to the emergency management, website on the county's website and sign up for Code Red. The other thing it does is has reverse notification capabilities, right? So through a collaboration with FEMA's Integrated Public Alert Warning System, or IPALS as they call it, we can send mass notifications to anybody regardless of whether they're signed up for it or not. In the event of some sort of large-scale civil disturbance or something that would we need to get information to people that may just be traveling through the county.
Right.
So it leverages the same thing that the emergency alert system you see on TV, and you get those Amber Alerts and abduction alerts that scare the crap out of you on your cell phone at 3 a.m. when they go off, right? So it's that system,
Okay.
right? But that's only used for very, very specific needs. But we can send out reverse notifications through the county through Code Red.
Okay.
There's typically a corresponding debate that goes along with that, with tornado sirens and warning sirens and the lack of those here in the county. And it's a delicate balance, because what a lot of folk don't understand about tornado sirens is they're not meant to warn you if you're in your house, right? Tornado sirens are designed to alert people that are outside in public areas, parks, place where you may not have access to a TV, or you may not have access to the weather as something or a storm is moving in. So a lot of people say, well, we have a siren, but I can't hear it. Well, it's not designed for you to hear it inside of your home.
Makes sense.
So the county has to look at it and say, okay, so do we spend an inordinate amount of money on these types of sirens in areas, or do we try to focus our efforts and money on ways where I know I can get you information through your digital device, right? Because where you may not be near a siren where you can hear it, there's a 99% chance you got a cell phone in your hand.
Very true.
And if I can hit that cell phone, then I've done a greater service than hoping you're within a geographic boundary to hear a siren.
Thank you. And I think that's been a misnomer for a lot of folks that we understand.
Well, there's value. Don't get me wrong, and they function. We did get a grant several years back, and we put up a siren down at Lovejoy Park. So there is one down there that can function and has some other capabilities. We're still working through some upgrades since we transitioned our radio system, because it functions off of that same system.
Okay.
But yeah, so we do have one in some of our larger park areas where we can make those types of announcements and such.
Very nice. Okay. Very nice. Some of our patrons that often use the libraries are unhoused and are looking for stable housing or even stable employment. Are there efforts or plans that the county has in place to help residents, or to at least point them in the right direction for housing and possibly food and shelter?
Absolutely. So, we have a vast array of resources in the county that can help with that, from our housing authority. Our economic development office is always looking for avenues and means to redevelop properties. We talked a little bit earlier about some of our blighted areas and some of our older hotels and motels that are no longer, in business, looking for ways to partner, whether it's through a P3 partnership with a private company or through some other redevelopment and reinvestment opportunities to start to reshape and redevelop some of these into affordable housing, some market rate housing, and trying to tie those in kind of with other developments. But, you know, when you look at some of the resources that are in the county that can help them to some short-term housing type options, the food, you know, availability of the food. I know, you know, Clayton County has not the best access to fresh vegetables and stuff like that as much as we would like. So as we start looking to redevelop some of our areas, we want to focus on trying to bring in some like community garden type things where we can start building them into some developments so that we can start to shrink some of these food deserts that exist and give our citizens access to those fresh vegetables.
Very nice. Very nice. We experienced a couple of months ago some very severe cold weather.
Mhm.
And the county set up several warming stations. Are there plans to have either warming and or cooling stations as more, I guess, permanent locations for when the seasons change and some of our unhoused folks are out in the elements?
So the county has, as a part of its emergency operations plans, it has a specific annex that deals with nothing but warming and cooling stations. As far as permanent locations, we've identified certain county facilities that can be used for warming and cooling centers and or shelters should the need arise. You know, there's a very big difference between a warming and a cooling system and a shelter. That they're there to provide very different resources. But basically, we let our annex and our policy dictate the where, because we don't know where the issue may be. We don't know where the need may come from. So our policy is crafted in a way that gives us the guidance and the guidelines of the when, and the how, and the why. But the where we leave flexible, because we have several of our faith-based partners that, you know, that will partner with us. Some of our larger churches that says, hey, we can open up our gymnasium, we can accommodate this, and this. So we may opt to do that. You know, warming centers and cooling centers, they don't have to be weather related, right? So you could have a power outage in August that facilitates the need for this now. So not understanding where our need may be in the world of emergency management, flexibility is everything. And you have to be able to pivot. So while we use our plans as guides, we try not to pigeonhole ourselves into this or this or this, because if, let's say, this facility is a designated cooling facility, but your power's out too.
Right.
That does me no good, right? So it gives us the flexibility to be able to move.
Okay, makes sense. We talked a little bit previously about MARTA, or you mentioned MARTA, and the expansion of MARTA in the county. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know there's been discussion, I think it's a bus, rail, or it's a dedicated route for buses. Is that?
Right, so it's called Bus Rapid Transit.
Okay.
And essentially it's a hybrid of commuter rail, but using buses, right?
Okay.
So the challenge with commuter rail is, you know, because we were initially dependent upon Norfolk Southern and the usage of their tracks, kind of where Norfolk Southern stands right now is their preference was for us to develop commuter rail adjacent to their tracks instead of leveraging their tracks. The problem that creates is the width of that right-of-way acquisition would impact several of our cities in a pretty big way, right? With having to acquire enough right-of-way to come in and essentially build a set of tracks adjacent to Norfolk Southern's tracks.
Okay.
That makes that particular proposal kind of not feasible at this point, right? Based off that stance. So in order to make sure that we continue to provide our citizens with rapid transit options, we pivoted to bus rapid transit. And essentially what it does is it creates dedicated routes using some dedicated lanes of traffic for bus traffic only. Sometimes it's mixed use traffic lanes depending on the area that we are servicing, but there's very limited stops along the route, right? So the thought process is by having these dedicated lanes, fewer stops, buses can move just as rapidly, right? Will it be as rapid as rail? No. But as far as being able to provide that service to the citizens, that's something that we can get done very rapidly. So we're looking at 2 lines right now. One is the one that's currently underway and what you've been seeing a lot. of it out there, which is the South Lake BRT, which comes out of Hartsville Jackson, meanders its way through Fayetteville over past the hospital, and ultimately terminates at South Lake Mall. Then there's another line that's currently being studied. It's very early on, which will be the 54 line, but it comes down from like Forest Park and shoots down toward Lovejoy around the Justice Complex and some other areas. So it's a very good hybrid solution to the commuter rail problem. It's been proved very effective in some other areas. I know county leadership and a lot of the MARTA team went out to Indianapolis to look at Indigo, which is kind of their BRT route. And that's where a lot of our thoughts around the TOD nodes came up, the transit-oriented development and redeveloping where these stops would be. Because what we saw in Indianapolis was they did a tremendous job of within quarter mile or half a mile of these bus locations. They're building up the, residential over retail. You've got restaurants, you've got some shopping, and it's right there where the bus lets you off. So, you have some good housing mix up above them. So it's meant to move people rapidly through the county. And with its terminus at Hartsville Jackson, we're hoping to start attracting that airport base back into the north end of the county. When I grew up here, the north end of Riverdale and all that area was nothing but airline employees. That's why my parents moved here. As a matter of fact, my father went to work for Delta, and that's where we moved, was up in Riverdale. So everything up there was all airport centric. And then you started to see a lot of that shift as the airport started moving its way south, and a lot of that airport populace started going into other areas. So we're hoping that kind of reimagining some of the development around these areas can start to pull that airport populace back down into the county, so that now they have these direct routes of transportation from wherever they may be in the county straight up to Hartsville Jackson.
Nice. Very nice. Well, that's all the questions that I had. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see hands. Very nice. Do we have a microphone that we could?
Yes, but I actually have one that came in
Okay.
real quick, so we'll answer that first. The question is, it's a two-part question. How can we make Clayton County a walkable county with more sidewalks? And is there plans to make Clayton County connect with the Beltline?
A well-timed question. Okay, so let's start with the connected Clayton, okay? So there is a trail master plan within the county that looks at kind of building out our Clayton Connects trail system throughout the county. There's been a lot of trail developed out around Spivey Splash, the water park, and coming out of the Lake Spivey area, heading over west into other parts of the county. One of the things that we are looking at, there's a few different grants that we've received, as well as some SPLOST funding, where we're looking at doing some trail expansion over on the west side of the county in the Flat Shoals Park area, and then some up in District 1 up around the Conley Lake City area, kind of up in there. But we're looking at trying to start to build in some of these tracks and some of these areas where we can make the county more connected. We do have a fairly robust sidewalk network within this last SPLOST that was graciously approved. There is some money in there for additional sidewalks, additional trails, which is what we're working on building now. One of the things that was also included in that was some pedestrian overpasses. So for some of our trouble spots that we have, Terra Boulevard, a couple areas up on Highway 85, up around Garden Walk, where we have a lot of pedestrian versus auto accidents, and we're looking at trying to put some pedestrian overpasses in those areas like you see in so many other communities. Peachtree City has a blue billion of them, and some other areas up north, but to try and facilitate that safer connectivity, right? Because as we continue to build out that trail network, there is a need to have that safe passage across some of those main thoroughfares, so we don't have people that, have these incidents like we see so frequently. As far as connecting Clayton to the Beltline, I can tell you there's plans in the works around that. I just can't get into a lot of what that plan is at the moment. But there are some grants that we're working on achieving to study how we make that connectivity. Aerotropolis is involved in that. Atlanta Regional Commission is involved in that. But there's a lot of discussion right now about how do we grow that connectivity. And if you've seen kind of long-range vision for the areas adjacent to Southern Regional Medical Center and some other areas right there around the Flint River. If you ever go out and look at all the new development that's coming down the Chattahoochee out of South Fulton, it's a very similar program to that, right? It's trying to leverage a lot of our natural resources and then build sustainable development around those areas and then continue to connect that up points north, up into Hateville and up where the headwaters of the Flint start and then over to kind of the belt line, right? So that's kind of the area that we're studying now and trying to figure out how do we spur that development. It kind of goes back to one of the earlier renderings that was done about how do we rehabilitate the Flint adjacent to Southern Regional, because we have a large flooding issue right there. And it happens now several times a year where we only dealt with it once every couple years. But just because of other development north of us, a lot of that water is shedding down the Flint and causes that to flood. But in one of the earlier studies we did, we took a lot of that property once we fixed the Flint and built some community gardens and built some other things that so you can kind of start to get some of those fresh vegetables and some other food kind of things coming in. But yes, that is one of our major projects coming out of our Office of Resilience and Sustainability here in the county is working that project, and they're deeply involved with those other community partners that have a vested interest in kind of that southeast corridor coming around the airport.
Very good. That was very good. Thank you. So we have another question.
Hi, my name is Andrea Greenwood. I work at Clayton State in the admissions department, and I want to ask, how can we partner with the county to help increase enrollment at Clayton State?
Great question. So I think that partnership is critical, right? Because as Clayton State continues to expand their programming, I think, one of the easiest ways, and it kind of goes back to one of our earlier questions, is workforce development, right? So how do we create pathways within county government so that either students going through Clayton State, catching them right out of high school, as they, trying to get them into programming at Clayton State, because there are these connectivity pathways to where, depending on their course of study, use the government as a ways where they can gain that education, gain that insight into what does it mean to kind of work as a part of a government. That was kind of the impetus behind the firefighter pathway program that we created with the public schools, where, high school kids go to the fire department and get same training that we would train new employees on. They get it over 3 years, but when they graduate, they have a job. And right now that job is paying them close to $50,000 a year. So that's doing a couple things, right? It's helping workforce development within the public school system, but it's also helping driving the median income of the county as well, right? Which only leads to better things and better development and better others. So I think getting Clayton State involved in that, whether it's, we had early conversations about creating pathways from paramedic to nursing, and then bridging that from nursing at Clayton State over to Southern Regional to try to help feed their employee line as well, right? So there's so many little programs that have already in place that we just need to expound upon and say, okay, what programming does Clayton State offer where we could create internships or pathways into the government? Because as hard as it is for us to recruit as a government, we have all these employee centers. We just need to leverage them, right? We just need to kind of create these programming. The pathway and the template's there. We just need to now take it and apply it into these other areas. Do kind of the boost enrollment at Clayton State, help us get good quality workers, right? And then continue to help support our healthcare system, which is so vital, for the long-term stability and success of our community.
We have a question here.
Yes, hello. There are currently 2 studies going on in Clayton County, Future Focus Clayton and the Terra LCI, and they're similar but different. And what I've noticed is that how can we try to improve driving public input? I've been to a number of the meetings, and the turnout is nice, but we're such a big county. We need to try to get the word out that we're offering all these things for our input. And what like you said, you've touched on a bunch of them: BRT, sidewalks, the pedestrian overpasses, but you don't see a lot in the news about these upcoming events and how can we drive public interest.
Yes, sir. Great question. The county does its best, to try to get the information out to the populace. I think one of the challenges that we see in our community is we are a high transient population, right? We have a lot of renters in the county. So one of the things that we got to try and do is, and this goes back to kind of telling our own story a little bit better, right? Is to try and get the importance of community participation within these meetings, right? So as you say, you're going to the LCI studies, pretty much anything that involves transportation or a lot of these large scale community redevelopment projects are going to have public input to them. It becomes vital that our citizens take advantage of that, right? So we advertise with street signs, trying to do that at major intersections, but we got to be careful and limit the number of that because GDOT and other transportation, they don't want a lot of distraction around the transportation, right? So we want you paying attention to the street sign and not sitting here trying to read a big sign from the county, right? So we try to get that out to as many avenues as we can. Our libraries are a tremendous source of getting information on things that are upcoming, the county's website, Commissioner's e-blast, the announcements that go out through constant contact with the county, Public TV 23, trying to get announcements out there. So we use every avenue that we can. The trick is we got to get the public to come, right? It's public input, and we need the public, right, to be able to give us their input. Because here's the thing our residents need to understand is when you're looking at a project like the LCI study that's looking at Terra Boulevard and it's looking at these major transportation corridors, if we only hear 10 people's view of what they want to see, then that's what's going to happen. And if that's not the overall majority feeling about what we want to see in that area, then unfortunately it's those that show up and speak is kind of what's going to drive that, right? Because that's why we're asking for the input. It kind of goes back to the community planning units that we talked about earlier, getting the citizens engaged and involved in development. Because a lot of times we hear, well, that's not what I wanted in my area. Okay, now here's an opportunity for you to tell us what you want in your area, but we got to have your input. We got to get those comments in. We got to get our communities engaged and helping us understand, where do you want to see this county driven? We all know what we want. We want better restaurants. We want better this, we want more housing options. Okay, so here's the process we got to go through to get there. Now we need your input, right? So this is where this becomes a participative process where it's not just the government, in quotes, or the county leadership saying this is what we're going to do. This was the will of our citizen base. So can we do some things? Sure, we can all do things better, but we do try to advertise and leverage every opportunity that we have. It's active citizens encouraging the other ones to come and be a part of the process. Does it mean you're going to have to take a couple hours out of your evening? Sure. But that's part of that involvement. That's part of, if you want this as your place to live, then be a part of those opportunities when they show up and tell us what it is that you want, because the will of the community will win every time, right? So the trick is that will of 10 or will of a couple hundred? That's where the community side of that comes in. But great question.
Have another question?
Yes, we have another question.
I have several, but I just narrowed down to this one.
Oh, this is going to be a good one then.
We're talking about housing. I just read an article where they said there are 3 corporations who have bought over 9,000 homes in Metro Atlanta and turned them into rental properties. Is there anything, or is the commissioners, or is there any discussion floating about mitigating that, putting a moratorium on it, something giving the average person an opportunity to recapture their dream?
Absolutely. So, the county, the county is in the middle of its comprehensive plan rewrite for the county, which looks at those types of things. It looks at our zoning, it looks at our future land use map, and it looks at a lot of the housing rules and things that we have in the county. This is where kind of going back to that community participation comes in. When those public meetings for the county's comprehensive plan update comes in to place, that's where that citizen input needs to come from. But to directly answer your question, yes, The board is currently looking for ways and working with county legal to say, okay, we understand there's certain rights around property ownership and selling property and all of that, but how can we put checks and balances into place so that we don't become a primary rental type option, right? You see a lot of things going on right now, and a lot of communities are struggling with what they call pad splits, right? Where those same companies are coming in and taking what should be a 3 or 4 bedroom single family home and turning it into a place where 11 people can live, right? So those are becoming, and I know there's been a lot of legal challenges with those types of ordinances trying to eliminate that. So it's a slippery slope when you start looking at property ownership, because there are some rights involved with you as an individual and a citizen being able to own property. So it becomes, how far can the government restrict that? And what can we do to try and curtail a lot of that rental, so that, to your point, because you got to look at it too, that drives up housing costs as well, right? Because they're coming in paying cash out of pocket, for these homes. And in a lot of instances, they gobble them up as soon as they hit the market. So even if you are in the market looking for something, if you don't have cash in hand and you're ready to close in 30 days, you're out of the loop. And I know a lot of folk that just bought property, or first-time homeowners that struggled trying to find a home just for that reason. So it is something the county sees as an issue, and it is something that they're looking to fix.
I have a question, just to piggyback off what you said. As you may have known, I will tell you that JP Morgan and Chase, they are coming in and they're buying a bunch of land, and they're putting these residents on property. They are not selling them, they are leasing or either renting them out. So that's all fall in the same spectrum what you just said.
It does, but in that particular instance, if you'll start to notice and you watch a lot of the zoning hearings that goes through the county right now, one of the things the board has started doing, and they've done it with a lot of some of the most recent subdivisions that have come through, and even some lots where they're infill development, right? Where they're coming in, buying 5 or 6 lots and building houses where they may previously have gone bankrupt. One of the things the board has started doing now is put restrictions through the zoning process on that, saying, hey, we'll approve the development. However, the first homeowner has to be fee simple, no rentals, right? So whoever's going to be the first one to purchase that property, once it's done, it has to be for single family residential, their ownership. So they're starting to put restrictions coming up through the zoning process to prevent exactly what you're talking about, which is somebody coming in and developing an entire subdivision that's going to be for rent. So they would have to sell the homes to somebody first. And then if that person chooses to sell it to somebody, then it could potentially become a rental depending on how it was set up. But they are curtailing a lot of that through the zoning process.
Any additional questions, Kim?
No, we don't have any additional. I think he answered everything.
Man, he did it all.
He answered everything.
Man, so thorough, so
Very
thorough.
good.
Can we get a round of applause for It's been a very, very enriching conversation. And again, we thank you for willing to come on Coffee with the Librarian. As I stated before, we bring folks who can talk about things that are of interest to the community and community resources. So please stay tuned for another episode. We will same bat station, same bat channel next month. Have a great day and a great week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.